I'm Madison Carter, and I'll never forget the phone call I got from my dad last Christmas. He didn't even say hello. He just sighed and said, Madison, maybe you shouldn't come this year. Ethan is bringing his girlfriend, and we don't want you to overshadow him. I stood there frozen, my chest tight, thinking, did I really just get banned from my own family's Christmas? Not because I failed, not because I caused a scene, but because my success was too much for them to handle. What they didn't know is that I'm the CEO of a global tech company, and a few months later, my brother would walk into my office for a job interview. Before I take you through everything that happened, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if stories of survival, family drama, and healing resonate with you, please like, subscribe, and stay with me. Now, before I tell you how I ended up sitting across from my brother in a job interview at my own company, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in the suburbs of Ohio, in what looked from the outside like a picture-perfect family. My dad, Richard, worked a stable corporate job. My mom, Helen, kept the house spotless and hosted neighborhood barbecues. And my younger brother, Ethan, 4 years younger than me, was the golden boy in their eyes. People who saw us at church or at school events probably thought we were the model American family. But behind those closed doors, the picture was far from perfect. From as early as I can remember, Ethan was the center of our household. He was the sensitive one, the one my parents thought needed all the attention and encouragement. I was the strong one, the independent one, the child who didn't need help. That's what they told me, over and over again. When Ethan brought home a C+ on his math test, Dad took him out for ice cream and said, "See, son, you're improving. We're proud of you." When I brought home straight A's, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's expected, Madison. Keep it up." I learned very quickly that in my house, excellence didn't earn celebration. It just raised the bar higher. There was one memory that burned into me more than most. I was in high school, 16 years old, and I had qualified for the National Debate Championship. It was a big deal. I had worked for months, staying up late, practicing with my team, carrying binders full of notes on the bus every day. The night before the competition, I begged my parents to come watch me. Dad said he had a critical work call he couldn't miss. Mom claimed she had a migraine. I ended up boarding a Greyhound bus alone, carrying all my things in a backpack and clutching the $20 bill Mom had shoved into my hand at the door. That weekend, I walked into that competition hall by myself, stood on a stage in front of strangers, and debated my heart out. And I won. First place, national champion. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would finally be the thing that made them look at me with pride. But when I came home, medal still around my neck, I found them both sitting on the couch, cheering as Ethan played video games. When I tried to tell them about my victory, Dad just said, "That's nice, Maddie. But your brother really needed us today. His team lost their last game and he took it hard. You're strong. You'll be fine." That line stuck with me. You're strong. You'll be fine. It was their excuse every single time. When Ethan struck out at Little League, they bought him ice cream to cheer him up. When I broke the school record for GPA, Mom barely looked up from the laundry. When Ethan had a science fair project, sloppy, thrown together the night before, they spent hours helping him glue it together. When I had a project, I stayed up until 2 in the morning finishing mine alone. It wasn't that they hated me. That would almost have been easier. No, it was worse. They simply didn't see me. To them, Ethan was the sun, and I was just another star in the sky, bright but unremarkable, easy to ignore. I can still remember the sting of sitting on the bleachers through 15 straight games, watching Ethan warm the bench while Mom and Dad screamed his name like he was the MVP. When I finally asked them why they never came to my events, Mom put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Honey, you're independent. Ethan needs us more. You'll thank us one day for making you strong." I didn't feel strong. I felt invisible. And it's funny. People think childhood unfairness fades as you grow up. It doesn't. It takes root. Every ignored achievement, every brushed off victory, every time I swallowed the hurt, It built a hollow space inside me that no trophy or medal could fill. By the time I was a teenager, I had already learned the unspoken rule of our family. Ethan's failures mattered more than my successes, and no matter what I did, I would never be the child worth celebrating. High school was supposed to be a fresh start, but for me, it only proved how deep the favoritism ran in my family. By then, I had stopped hoping for equal treatment, but I still caught myself wishing, maybe this time, maybe this achievement, they'll notice me. When I graduated valedictorian, I stood on that stage with the gold sash across my gown and delivered a speech that my teachers later told me was the best they'd heard in years. My classmates cheered, my principal shook my hand with pride, and for a brief moment I thought my parents might finally see me. But when I walked off the stage, they handed me a set of luggage. "For your journey ahead," Mom said, smiling like she had just done me a huge favor. Luggage. That was my reward for years of perfect grades, sleepless nights, and scholarship offers. 3 years later, Ethan barely scraped through high school with a GPA under 3.0. He walked across the stage without honors, without distinction, and my parents acted like he'd just cured cancer. They surprised him with a brand new Mustang, cherry red, complete with a big silver bow on top. I remember standing in the driveway, watching Ethan rev the engine while Dad clapped him on the back, and Mom snapped pictures like it was a once-in-a-lifetime accomplishment. No one even looked at me. My entire high school career, every honor society, every award ceremony, every trophy, boiled down to one suitcase. Ethan's mediocrity earned him a sports car. That was the Carter household in a nutshell, and it didn't stop there. Chores? Those were mine. By 16, I was cooking dinner 3 nights a week, folding laundry, scrubbing bathrooms. Ethan, at 12, couldn't even make himself a sandwich. If I complained, Mom would say, "He's a boy, Maddie. Boys develop differently. He needs more time." Dad would add, "The world is harder for young men these days. You girls have all these programs to support you." As if my independence was some kind of privilege they had granted me. But the real slap in the face came when Ethan decided he wanted to be an entrepreneur. He convinced my parents to give him $10,000 to start a little online clothing business with some friends. I knew it wouldn't last. He had no plan, no discipline, no clue. Within 6 months, the website was dead. The money was gone, and the only thing Ethan gained was another excuse. Dad just laughed and said, "That's part of learning, son. At least you tried." Meanwhile, I was working 3 part-time jobs after school, babysitting, waitressing, tutoring, just to save up for college applications. One night, I sat at the kitchen table filling out forms, asking Mom if she could cover the $40 application fee for a school I had dreamed about. She didn't even look up from her phone. "We can't afford that right now, Maddie. We need to set money aside for Ethan's future." That's when it clicked for me. They weren't just blind to my efforts. They were actively choosing him every single time. To make it worse, Mom had this habit of bragging on Facebook about Ethan, calling him the pride of our family whenever he managed the smallest achievement. A part-time job at the mall? So proud of my hardworking son? A failed startup? Every setback is a setup for a comeback. We believe in you, Ethan. And me? My scholarship offers, my trophies, my late nights studying under a desk lamp. Never made it online. It was like I didn't even exist. That summer, Ethan crashed the Mustang Dad had bought him. The repairs cost thousands, but instead of holding him accountable, they just called it a mistake every young man makes. When I asked Dad how that was fair, he turned on me with a sharp look. "You're strong, Maddie. You'll figure things out. Ethan just needs more support." Strong, independent, fine. That was the label they stuck on me, and it became their excuse to abandon me. By the time I was ready to leave for college, the message was clear. Ethan was the future of the Carter family. I was just passing through. When I finally packed that luggage they gave me, the one gift for all my years of achievement, I promised myself I would never look back. College was supposed to be my escape, my chance to build a life outside of Ethan's shadow. But leaving didn't erase the patterns that had shaped me. If anything, it carved the wound deeper. My parents made it clear from day one that they weren't going to help. Dad sat me down and said, "We've got to be realistic. College is expensive, and we need to make sure Ethan has the support he needs when it's his turn." I stared at him, stunned. His turn? I was the one standing there with scholarship letters, ready to work, ready to fight for a future. Ethan was still failing algebra. Yet somehow, all the money, all the safety nets, all the sacrifices, they were for him. So I worked. I took the early morning coffee shop shifts, serving lattes at 5 a.m. with textbooks open under the counter. I filed papers at a law office on weekends. I tutored kids late into the night. Some weeks I clocked 30 hours of work on top of my full course load, and still, I made it. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in business and computer science. And what did my parents say at graduation? They showed up late, left early, and barely listened when I told them about the job offers waiting for me. Mom brushed me off with, "That's nice, dear. But Ethan is thinking about business school. Maybe he'll follow in your footsteps." My father kept checking his watch, muttering about traffic. The one moment that was supposed to feel like mine disappeared into another conversation about my brother's potential. Even in college, their favoritism followed me like a ghost. Mom's Facebook posts never stopped. Ethan's entrepreneurial spirit, Ethan's amazing resilience, Ethan's bright future. Meanwhile, my name rarely appeared. When it did, it was usually as a footnote. Proud of Ethan for his new job. And yes, Madison is still working hard in school. That was it. My years of sacrifice, my sleepless nights, my victories, they all got boiled down to still working hard. One night, exhausted from a 12-hour day of classes and shifts, I scrolled through her page. There was a picture of Ethan holding a participation trophy from some local rec league, Mom gushing in the caption, "So proud of our boy. He shines so bright." I remember setting my phone down and whispering to myself, "What about me? Don't I shine too?" But of course they didn't hear me. There was another moment I'll never forget. I had just finished a grueling final exam week and called home, desperate just to hear someone say they were proud of me. Instead, Dad picked up and said, "Hey, Maddie, listen, Ethan's Mustang is in the shop again. We had to help him with the repairs. Could you send him a little money from that job of yours? You're better with finances than he is." I hung up the phone and cried until my chest ached. Not because of the money, but because in their eyes, I wasn't their daughter chasing her dreams. I was just a backup plan, the safety net for their golden child. By the time I stepped into the workforce, I had already learned two hard truths. First, no matter what I accomplished, my parents would always see me as less than Ethan. And second, if I wanted a life that meant anything, I would have to build it completely on my own. Those truths shaped everything I became. They gave me the grit to work harder than anyone else, to climb faster, to refuse to quit. But they also left a scar I carried everywhere I went. A deep, hollow ache that whispered, "You're still not enough." And that scar, that hunger for recognition I never got at home, is what made that phone call on Christmas hit me so hard. Because after everything, after the degrees, the promotions, the empire I built, they still saw me as the daughter they could leave out. When I walked across the stage at graduation, summa cum laude with a double major in business and computer science, I thought I was finally free. Free from the constant comparisons, free from being invisible in my own family. What I didn't realize was that freedom had a price tag, and it was steep. I landed my first job at a mid-sized tech company in Chicago, entry-level analyst. The kind of job where you sit in a cubicle that feels more like a shoebox, answering emails no one wants to read and crunching numbers that no one thanks you for. My paycheck barely covered my studio apartment and student loan payments. But I told myself, this is the start. Everyone starts somewhere. So I showed up an hour early every morning, left long after the lights in the office had gone dim. I volunteered for every task no one else wanted. Fixing broken spreadsheets, documenting outdated systems, sitting through mind-numbing meetings just so I could learn something. Anything. I worked until my eyes burned, until my fingers cramped, until the cleaning crew asked if I was planning to move in. 18 months of that schedule nearly broke me. I survived on instant noodles, vending machine coffee, and pure stubbornness. There were nights I cried into my pillow because I felt like I was drowning, working harder than everyone else but still just another name on the org chart. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered my dad's voice telling me computers weren't real work. I remembered my mom bragging about Ethan's potential while ignoring my actual achievements. And I swore I would prove them wrong. And then it happened. I noticed a bottleneck in one of our production pipelines, a flaw that had been draining the company millions every year. Nobody else wanted to touch it. They said it was too complicated, too messy. I spent 3 weeks digging into every line of code, mapping every step of the process. When I finally presented my solution, the boardroom went silent. Then the CFO leaned back in his chair and said, "Do you realize how much money this will save us?" That day, everything changed. They promoted me to team lead at 25, the youngest in the company's history. Suddenly, I had people reporting to me, budgets to manage, projects with stakes higher than I had ever imagined. For the first time in my life, I felt like my hard work had been noticed. But when I called home to share the news, the response was silence. My dad sighed and said, "Computers, Maddie? I still don't get why you didn't choose something stable like teaching." My mom asked if the promotion meant I'd have more free time to finally start dating seriously. And just like that, the pride I had felt crumbled. Meanwhile, Ethan had already dropped out of community college. He had bounced from retail to food service to delivery jobs, quitting each one after a few months. But my parents never called him lazy. No, they said he was finding his path. Every failure was framed as growth. Every excuse was accepted with open arms. It was like living in a parallel universe. In mine, I was grinding myself into exhaustion just to be seen. In theirs, Ethan was the golden child, the one worth investing in, the one they bragged about to friends, even as he slept in until noon and racked up parking tickets he couldn't pay. There were nights I would come home to my empty apartment, kick off my heels, and scroll through social media. Mom's page was full of posts about Ethan. "So proud of our boy starting a new job. Ethan has such a bright future." My name? Never mentioned. It was as if I didn't exist. I'd pour myself a glass of cheap wine, stare out the window at the city lights, and whisper, "One day, you'll have to see me. One day, you won't be able to ignore me anymore." But even then, deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't chasing promotions just for myself. I was chasing them because I wanted something I had never gotten at home: recognition. I wanted my parents to say, "We're proud of you, Madison." Just once. That call never came. And as much as it hurt, it was also the fuel that kept me going. Because if they weren't going to see me, then the whole world would. Becoming a team lead at 25 felt like stepping into a different world. Suddenly, people were looking to me for answers. I wasn't just fixing spreadsheets anymore. I was managing budgets, deadlines, and a group of engineers twice my age who weren't thrilled about taking orders from the kid. At first, it was brutal. Every meeting felt like a test. Every decision I made was second-guessed. I'd walk into conference rooms and hear whispers. "She's too young. She's just a diversity hire. She won't last 6 months." So I did what I'd always done. I worked harder. I learned every detail of every system my team touched. I stayed late, asked questions, built relationships. Slowly, grudgingly, the skeptics started to trust me. And then came the project that changed everything. One of our largest clients was threatening to pull a multi-million-dollar contract because of constant delays. Morale in the office was collapsing. I was given the task nobody wanted: revive the project or watch it die. I poured myself into it. Late nights, weekend strategy sessions, endless negotiations. I listened to everyone: engineers, designers, even the junior staff who were usually ignored. Piece by piece, I rebuilt the process, cut the red tape, and gave my team room to breathe. 3 months later, not only did we deliver, but the client renewed their contract for 5 more years. That win didn't just save the company. It put me on the map. Within a year, I was promoted again. director of operations at 27, one of the youngest directors in the firm. My picture was in industry newsletters. Colleagues congratulated me in the halls, and even people I barely knew sent emails saying they were inspired by my work. I thought, this is it. This is the moment my parents will finally be proud. I called home, voice trembling with excitement, and told my mom I'd been promoted to director. There was a pause. Then she said, "That's nice, dear. But Ethan is thinking about business school. Isn't that exciting?" I almost dropped the phone. Business school? Ethan had barely survived 2 semesters of community college before dropping out. He hadn't held a job for more than 6 months. And now they were celebrating him for thinking about something, while I was living proof of success. I pressed, "Mom, did you hear me? I'm the youngest director in my company's history." She chuckled softly and said, "Maddie, you've always been the strong one. We don't worry about you. Ethan needs more encouragement." That word again. Strong. Their permanent excuse for neglect. The more I accomplished, the more invisible I became at home. Dad told relatives that Ethan was finding his path and might start his own business soon. At family gatherings, they'd gush about his potential, while my career was brushed aside as if it didn't even exist. Once I caught Dad telling an uncle that my job was basically like being a secretary with a fancy title. I wanted to scream. Meanwhile, Ethan tried another startup. My parents wrote him another check, $20,000 this time. Predictably, the business tanked in less than a year. But instead of disappointment, Dad raised his glass at dinner and toasted, "Here's to my son, the risk taker. At least he's brave enough to fail." Brave enough to fail. And what was I? Invisible enough to succeed. It wasn't just family. Even in the workplace, the world seemed eager to remind me I was a woman in a man's industry. Colleagues called me sweetheart in meetings. A senior manager once asked me if I was planning to have kids soon before approving a budget proposal. When I landed a spot on an executive panel, a peer smirked and said, "Guess they needed some diversity on stage." Every time someone doubted me, I thought of my parents. Their voices blended with the skeptics around me. And every time I proved them wrong, it felt like I was proving my family wrong too. But the truth is, victory without acknowledgement feels hollow. I would sit alone in my apartment, scrolling through industry articles that praised my leadership, and wonder why I still felt empty. I had money now, prestige, influence. But when I called home, all I heard was, "Ethan is trying something new. We're so proud of him." The higher I climbed, the lonelier it felt. By the time I hit 28, I was running departments, managing hundreds of employees, traveling internationally. To the outside world, I was unstoppable. Inside, I was still the little girl standing in the driveway, watching my brother get handed the keys to a brand new Mustang while I clutched an empty suitcase. And that's when I realized success wouldn't heal me. At least, not in the way I wanted. Because the recognition I craved wasn't coming from the world. It was coming from a family who had already decided I didn't matter. But if they weren't going to celebrate me, then I'd climb so high the whole world would know my name, even if my own parents never spoke it. By the time I turned 30, I had already climbed higher than I ever imagined. After years at my first company, I was approached by a headhunter for a global tech corporation, one of the biggest names in the industry. The offer was life-changing. A senior vice president role with a direct path to the executive board. I didn't hesitate. I packed my bags, moved across the country, and stepped into a world I had once only dreamed about. The pace was ruthless. Meetings with international clients, 12-hour workdays, flights every other week. But I thrived in the chaos. I had spent my entire life proving myself. And now I had a stage big enough for the world to see. My strategies boosted revenue, my leadership rebuilt entire departments, and my name started showing up in industry magazines. "The young executive to watch," one headline read. And then, just 2 years later, it happened. The board voted me in as CEO, 32 years old, running a multi-billion-dollar company, the youngest in its history. The kind of achievement people dream about their whole lives. I should have felt unstoppable. I should have been celebrating. But the first thing I did was pick up the phone and call home. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "I was just appointed CEO." There was a pause. Then a low grunt. "Well, that's nice, Maddie. But your brother just started seeing someone new. Her name's Lauren. She's in tech too. Really impressive girl. We're excited to meet her." I nearly dropped the phone. I had just told him I was the youngest CEO in company history, and he changed the subject to Ethan's girlfriend. That moment broke something inside me. It wasn't just dismissal. It was erasure. My life's work, my sleepless nights, my sacrifices, all buried under the glow of Ethan's newest distraction. A week later, I visited home for the first time in months. On the kitchen counter, I spotted a newspaper folded neatly. The front page featured me, my photo, my story, the headline announcing my rise to CEO. But instead of being displayed proudly, it was tucked away under junk mail, as if they were hiding it. When I asked why it wasn't out, Mom smiled nervously and said, "Oh, we didn't want to brag. People might think we're showing off." But a day later, I saw her on Facebook posting about Lauren, the girlfriend Ethan had been dating for barely 3 months. So inspired by this amazing young woman. Can't wait to see all the great things she'll do. Not a word about me. It was like being erased twice, once in my own home and again on the screen for the whole world to see. That night, as I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, I thought about every moment that had led here. The suitcases instead of a car. The silence instead of applause. The excuses. "You're strong. You'll be fine." And now, even at the peak of my career, even with the world calling my name, I was still invisible to the two people whose approval I had chased my entire life. I realized then that no title, no paycheck, no article could fill the void they had left. Recognition from the world felt hollow if the people who raised me refused to see me. And yet, beneath the ache, there was something else. Resolve. If my family chose to ignore me, then I would no longer waste my energy trying to earn their pride. My success wasn't for them anymore. It was for me. Still, I couldn't shake the bitterness. At industry galas, I would smile for cameras, sip champagne, and shake hands with leaders who treated me like I belonged at the table. But inside, I heard my dad's voice. "That's nice, Maddie. But Ethan, always Ethan." And the irony? Just a few months after I took the CEO seat, Ethan applied for a job at my company. The golden child, the one they had sacrificed everything for, was about to sit across from me in a room where the power dynamic had shifted completely. The thought made me laugh. Bitter, hollow laughter. My parents had spent decades convincing me I was the background character in Ethan's story. And now, without even realizing it, they had set him up to walk into mine. What they didn't know was that this time I wasn't going to shrink myself for anyone. Not for my parents. Not for Ethan. Not for the family that had spent years pretending I didn't exist. This time, the spotlight was mine. It was early December when the phone rang. I had just come home from another 12-hour day at the office. My heels were kicked off by the door, my jacket draped over a chair, and I was halfway through heating up leftovers when I saw the name flash on the screen. Dad. For a moment, I hesitated. My father never called me just to talk. If my parents wanted something, it was usually through a short text, a reminder about birthdays, or a forwarded chain email. Calls from Dad meant one of two things: bad news or a request for money. I picked up anyway. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to sound cheerful. There was no hello, no small talk. Just a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Maddie, maybe you shouldn't come home for Christmas this year." I froze. "What?" Another sigh. "It's just, Ethan is bringing his girlfriend, Lauren. It's important for him, and we don't want anything to overshadow his moment. You understand, right?" For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Overshadow him? Dad, what are you talking about? It's Christmas. I'm your daughter. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Look, honey, it's not personal. But every time you're around, Ethan feels like he can't shine. This is his year. Let him have it. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the microwave as the timer beeped. My food forgotten. My chest tightened until it felt hard to breathe. Did my own father just ban me from Christmas? Dad, I whispered, my voice breaking. I've done nothing but work my whole life. I don't cause drama. I don't demand anything from you. I just wanted to spend one day with my family. He cut me off. Don't make this difficult, Maddie. You're strong. You'll be fine. There it was again. That cursed word. Strong. Their excuse for every slight, every dismissal, every time they left me behind. I wanted to scream, to tell him that being strong didn't mean I deserved to be exiled. But the words wouldn't come. My throat ached with a lump of anger and sorrow that refused to move. Fine, I finally said, though it sounded hollow. If that's what you want. When I hung up, the silence in my apartment felt deafening. I stared at my reflection in the darkened window, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not the quiet tears I used to shed in my pillow during college, not the exhausted sobs after another day of being overlooked. These tears were hot, angry, messy. They poured out of me like a flood I had held back for decades. Because this wasn't just about one Christmas. This was about every birthday they forgot, every ceremony they skipped, every time Ethan's failures were celebrated louder than my victories. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being invisible, and now being erased. I thought about calling Mom, hoping she might soften the blow, but I already knew what she'd say. Maddie, don't be so dramatic. It's just one holiday. Ethan needs us more right now. The script was too familiar, and I couldn't stomach hearing it again. So I sat there in the dark, phone still in my hand, wondering how a family could turn their daughter into an outsider so casually, like crossing a name off a guest list. The next morning, I walked into the office with swollen eyes and a tight smile. No one noticed. My team congratulated me on a successful quarter, my assistant handed me a stack of reports, and life marched on. But inside, I was unraveling. At night, when I scrolled through social media, I saw posts from colleagues about planning their family holidays, pictures of decorated trees and smiling children. And all I could think was, I wasn't good enough to be invited to my own family's Christmas. I had been excluded from things before. Vacations, dinners, conversations. But this was different. This was deliberate. It wasn't forgetfulness or favoritism. It was a decision. And that decision shattered me. Because for the first time, I realized they weren't just blind to my success. They resented it. My achievements had become a threat to the golden child they had built their world around. And rather than celebrate both of us, they chose to erase me. That night, lying in bed, I whispered to myself, "You're still that little girl with the suitcase. And they'll never let you come home." The words tasted bitter, but they were true. And as much as it broke me, a part of me knew. This wasn't the end of the story. This was just the crack before the collapse. Christmas Eve arrived, and for the first time in my life, I didn't pack a bag. I didn't drive home, and I didn't step through the front door to the smell of Mom's cooking. Instead, I sat alone in my high-rise apartment, staring at the lights of the city below, wondering how I had ended up here, banished from my own family gathering. I tried to distract myself. I booked a reservation at one of the nicest restaurants in Chicago, thinking maybe if I surrounded myself with holiday cheer, it would feel less empty. The maitre d' greeted me politely, but when I told him it was just one, his eyebrows flicked up ever so slightly. A woman dining alone on Christmas Eve, it was almost unheard of. They seated me at a corner table, lit by a single candle. Around me, families clinked glasses, couples leaned in close. Children giggled at plates of desserts shaped like reindeer. I smiled at the waiter, ordered a glass of wine and a steak, and tried to pretend I didn't notice the curious glances. But the truth was impossible to ignore. I wasn't celebrating Christmas. I was surviving it. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There it was. my family's Christmas photo, Dad in his holiday sweater, Mom beaming, Ethan front and center with his arm around Lauren. They stood in front of the tree I had helped decorate every year since childhood. Stockings hung on the mantel. Mine wasn't there. I stared at the screen, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. My name, my presence, my very existence, erased in a single snapshot. Then I scrolled further. Mom's caption read, "So proud of our Ethan and his wonderful girlfriend Lauren, our very own power couple. Blessed beyond measure this Christmas." Power couple. Those were the words she chose. Not for me, her daughter who had fought her way to CEO of a global company, but for Ethan and the girl he had been dating for 3 months. I laughed bitterly, loud enough that the couple at the next table turned to look. I waved it off and wiped at my eyes, pretending it was the wine. But my heart was breaking in a way I hadn't felt since I was a child. Back at my apartment, the loneliness felt heavier. I poured myself another glass of wine and stared at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying the Christmases of my childhood. Ethan tearing into presents while Mom and Dad cheered. Me quietly opening books or sweaters, smiling politely even as my stomach twisted. The favoritism had always been there. But this was different. This wasn't subtle. This wasn't neglect by accident. This was replacement. They weren't just celebrating Ethan anymore. They were celebrating him with someone else. Someone who had taken my place. And maybe that was what hurt most. Not that I was invisible, but that I was disposable. I thought about calling, about demanding an explanation, but what would they say? "Don't be dramatic, Maddie. We just wanted Ethan to feel special." No matter what words they used, the truth would stay the same. They chose him, and in choosing him, they rejected me. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, trying to sleep, but the sound of carols drifted up from the street below. Families singing together, laughter echoing through the night. It felt like the universe itself was mocking me. And yet, in that silence, a strange clarity settled over me. For so long, I had fought to earn their pride, their recognition, their love. But sitting there alone, glass of wine in hand, I realized maybe I didn't need it anymore. Maybe I had spent too many years chasing approval from people who would never give it. Still, even with that thought, the ache remained. I whispered into the dark, "Merry Christmas, Madison. You're all you've got." And it was both the saddest and the strongest thing I had ever said to myself. After Christmas, I thought maybe the sting would fade, that I could bury myself in work and let the days blur until it was just another bad memory. But the universe had other plans. It started with the photos. Mom's Facebook was filled with pictures of Ethan and Lauren. Dinner parties, movie nights, family outings, all without me. The captions made my stomach twist. "So blessed to have Lauren join our family. Our pride and joy, Ethan and his beautiful girlfriend. The future looks so bright." They weren't just including her. They were showcasing her, holding her up like the daughter they'd always wanted. One post in particular cut the deepest. A photo of Lauren helping Mom in the kitchen, both of them wearing matching aprons. The caption, "Finally, someone who feels like a real daughter to me." I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Real daughter. What did that make me? At first, I tried to laugh it off, telling myself Mom was just being dramatic on social media. But deep down, I knew the truth. They had replaced me. After years of treating me like I was too strong to need them, too successful to deserve them, they had found someone easier to love. Lauren was everything I wasn't, at least in their eyes. Sweet, agreeable, happy to play the role of doting girlfriend. She didn't threaten Ethan's spotlight. She enhanced it. She was an accessory to his glory, not a competitor. And that made her perfect. I wanted to hate her, but the truth was I barely knew her. She had done nothing wrong. The anger I felt wasn't really for Lauren. It was for my parents, for Ethan, for the family who had decided I was too much. Too much ambition, too much success, too much of a reminder that their golden boy was never golden at all. Still, the betrayal burned. Every time I opened my phone, I was confronted with a new reminder that I had been erased and replaced. I stopped scrolling. I stopped calling. I stopped hoping. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Olivia, my closest friend since college. She never sugarcoated anything, which was why I trusted her. Hey, just a heads up. Ethan's been bragging around town. Says he's about to land a huge job in tech, some big company. He's telling people he's finally going to prove himself. I read the text 3 times, my pulse quickening. Ethan? A huge job? The same Ethan who had quit every job he ever had? The same Ethan who had burned through my parents' money on failed startups? I almost dismissed it. Until I read the next line. He said the interview's coming up soon. Madison, I think it's your company. I felt the air leave my lungs. For a moment, I just sat there at my desk, staring at the screen. Then, slowly, the irony sank in. After years of being ignored, after being cast aside for Christmas, after being replaced in my own family, my brother was about to walk straight into my office. The golden child, the one my parents had sacrificed everything for, the one who had been given chance after chance after chance, was now coming to me for his next opportunity. I leaned back in my chair, a bitter smile spreading across my face. Life had a way of circling back, didn't it? I thought of Dad's voice on the phone. Don't come home, Maddie. Let Ethan have his moment. I thought of Mom's caption. Finally, a real daughter. I thought of all the nights I had cried, all the years I had clawed my way up alone. And now, Ethan was about to step into my world. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sorrow. Power. Because this time, I wasn't the girl with the suitcase, the daughter left out of the photo, the outsider at Christmas. I was the CEO. I was the one in control. And Ethan, whether he realized it or not, was about to find out exactly what that meant. The day Ethan walked into my office, I swear time slowed down. He pushed through the glass doors of the conference room like he owned the place. Expensive suit a size too big, hair slicked back, the same cocky grin he'd worn since high school. For a second, I was 16 again, watching him get handed the keys to that shiny red Mustang while I clutched an empty suitcase. But this time, the tables were turned. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was a candidate, and I was the one holding the pen that would decide his future. Madison, he said, stretching my name into something casual, as if we were meeting at a family barbecue. Didn't expect you'd actually be the one running this place. Guess that makes things easier, huh? I didn't smile. I gestured to the chair across from me. Take a seat, Ethan. He sat, leaned back like the leather belonged to him, and laced his fingers behind his head. So, I guess we can skip the formalities, right? I mean, you're the CEO. I'm your brother. This is just a formality. I studied him for a long moment. Same arrogance, same blind faith that the world and I would bend for him. Actually, no, I said, keeping my tone even. This is an interview, and in this room, you're not my brother. You're an applicant. For the first time, his smile faltered. I opened the folder in front of me, deliberately slow, letting the silence stretch. Your resume says you've worked in 3 startups, all of them folded within a year. Yeah, he said quickly, waving a hand. But that's experience. I know what not to do now. Failures build character, right? I tilted my head. And retail. Food service, delivery. None lasting more than 6 months. His jaw tightened. Those jobs weren't the right fit. Besides, you know me, I'm meant for something bigger. Something like this. He gestured around the conference room, as if the skyscraper and its empire were waiting with open arms just for him. I leaned forward, folding my hands. Ethan, why do you think you're qualified to work here? He blinked. Qualified? I mean, come on, Maddie, it's me. You owe me this. You've already got everything. Money, success, recognition. All I'm asking for is a shot. My stomach turned, but I kept my face steady. You think you're owed a position? That's not how this works. He scoffed, leaning forward now, trying to reclaim the power he was losing. Don't play tough, Maddie. You've had it easy your whole life. Scholarships, promotions, opportunities falling into your lap. Meanwhile, I've had to struggle. I almost laughed. Easy? Did he think my sleepless nights, 3 jobs in college, endless hours clawing my way up the corporate ladder were easy? Did he think being erased by our parents while he was celebrated for mediocrity was easy? But I didn't laugh. I met his eyes and said softly, "The only thing that's ever been easy is the way Mom and Dad handed you everything while I had to fight for scraps." His face darkened. "So what, this is revenge? You're going to hold a grudge forever?" "No," I said, my voice calm, almost cold. "This isn't revenge. This is reality. And reality doesn't bend because you're my brother. You want a place here? Prove you deserve it." For the first time in his life, Ethan didn't have a quick answer. He shifted in his seat, the arrogance slipping, replaced by something I'd never seen on his face before. Uncertainty. I let the silence hang, heavy and sharp. Then I closed the folder. "That's all for today. We'll be in touch." He stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. "Wait, you're not seriously treating me like everyone else?" I stood. Exactly like everyone else. He left the room with his shoulders tight, his swagger cracked. And as the door clicked shut behind him, I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in years. Not just power, but justice. For once, I wasn't the forgotten daughter, the strong one left to figure it out alone. I was the one setting the rules. And Ethan had just learned what it felt like to live in my world. It didn't take long before the phone calls started. The morning after Ethan's interview, my phone buzzed before I'd even finished my first coffee. Dad's name lit up the screen. I knew what was coming, but I answered anyway. "Madison," he said, skipping any greeting. "I heard Ethan came in yesterday." "How did it go?" I took a slow breath. It went like every interview goes. He answered questions. "We'll review." There was a pause, then the voice I knew too well, the one laced with expectation. "Come on, Maddie. He's your brother. You don't need to play games, just give him the job." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "That's not how this works, Dad. We don't hand out jobs because of last names. He has to qualify like everyone else." His tone sharpened. "Family comes first. You of all people should understand that." Something inside me snapped. Family comes first? Where was that family when I worked 3 jobs just to apply to college? Where was that family when I called home to say I'd been promoted, and you brushed me off to talk about Ethan's potential? Where was that family when you told me not to come home for Christmas? Silence crackled on the line. For once, Dad didn't have a comeback. Finally, he muttered, "You're too emotional. This isn't about the past. It's about helping your brother when he needs you." I hung up without another word. But the calls didn't stop. That evening, Mom tried her turn. "Maddie, sweetheart," she began, her voice syrupy. "Ethan told us the interview was tough. He's nervous. Don't be so hard on him. You know he's sensitive." "Sensitive?" I bit back. "He walked into my office and told me I owed him a job. That's not sensitivity. That's entitlement." Mom sighed. "You don't understand. He's always looked up to you, and it's intimidating. If you don't give him this chance, it'll crush him." My laugh was sharp, humorless. So what? I've been crushed 1,000 times, and no one rushed to protect me. Her tone shifted, guilt wrapped in manipulation. "We just want both our children to succeed." I swallowed hard. "No, you want Ethan to succeed. You've never wanted anything from me except silence, and I'm done giving it to you." I ended the call before she could reply, my hand shaking as I set the phone down. For the next week, it was a barrage. Texts from Dad reminding me that blood is thicker than water. Voicemails from Mom pleading, "Don't turn your back on your brother." Even a message from an aunt who had clearly been fed a one-sided story. "Be kind, Maddie. Family needs us most when they fall." But every message only steeled my resolve. Because the truth was, they weren't worried about Ethan falling. They were worried about him finally facing a world that wouldn't hand him everything on a silver platter. And they expected me to keep playing the role I'd been cast in since childhood. The strong one, the silent one, the one who sacrificed so Ethan could shine. Not anymore. One evening, after a long board meeting, I sat alone in my office, the city glittering beyond the windows. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Dad. "You'll regret this if you let him fail. He's family. Remember where you came from." I stared at the words, my jaw clenched. Then I typed back, "I do remember where I came from." That's exactly why I won't let him skip the line. Not in my company, not in my life. For the first time in years, I felt something lift. A weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Because standing up to my family wasn't just about Ethan's job. It was about reclaiming the part of myself they'd spent decades trying to erase. And I wasn't backing down. A few days after the interview, Ethan requested a follow-up meeting. He strode into my office without knocking, the same swagger in his step, as if the rejection so far hadn't even touched him. "Look," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "We both know how this is supposed to go. You're the CEO, I'm your brother. So stop dragging this out and just hire me already." I folded my hands on the desk. "Ethan, this isn't a game. You don't meet the qualifications." His laugh was sharp, mocking. "Qualifications? Don't make me laugh. Half the guys in your executive team got here through connections, not merit. Don't pretend the world runs on fairness. You've got the power. Use it." I kept my tone steady. "This company runs on results, not family ties." His grin faded, replaced by a sneer. "You've always thought you were better than me, haven't you? Ever since we were kids? Just because you buried yourself in books while I was actually living life." I bit back the urge to remind him that living life meant burning through every opportunity our parents handed him while I scraped by alone. Instead, I said, "I never thought I was better. I just worked harder. There's a difference." He slammed a hand on the desk. "You don't get it, Maddie. I deserve this. I've been overlooked, underappreciated. Do you know how hard it is being compared to you all the time?" The words almost made me laugh, bitter and incredulous. Compared to me? I had spent my whole life erased, watching him praised for failures while my successes were ignored. And now he had the audacity to paint himself as the victim. "You think you've been overlooked?" My voice rose despite myself. "You were handed everything. Cars, money, chances I never got. Every time you failed, they called you brave. Every time I succeeded, they called me strong and moved on. Don't stand there and tell me you've had it harder." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but it vanished quickly, swallowed by arrogance. "You owe me," he said coldly. "Mom and Dad always said you'd look out for me. That's what family does. If you don't give me this job, you'll regret it." There it was, the entitlement laid bare. He didn't see me as his sister. He saw me as a tool, a stepping stone, just like our parents did. I leaned forward, my voice low, cutting through the tension. "No, Ethan. What family does is support each other. What our family did was sacrifice me so you could fail in comfort. And I'm done playing that role." His jaw clenched. "You're going to regret this, Maddie. When the family turns on you, don't come crying." I stood, signaling the meeting was over. "This conversation is finished. You can leave now." He pushed back from the chair, anger radiating off him. "Fine, but don't forget, you're only sitting in that chair because you got lucky. One day, luck runs out." As the door slammed behind him, I let out a shaky breath. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer force of holding myself together. For years, I had carried the weight of his entitlement, my parents' favoritism, the unspoken rule that I should always make space for Ethan. And now, for the first time, I had said no. But as satisfying as it felt, I knew it wasn't over. Ethan wasn't the kind of man to walk away quietly. And my parents weren't the kind to accept my defiance. The storm was just beginning. The day after Ethan stormed out of my office, I woke up to a string of missed calls. "Mom, Dad. Even a couple of texts from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't need to read them to know what they said. Ethan had run home, spun his version of the story, and now the family tribunal was coming for me. By lunchtime, my office phone rang. This time, I answered on speaker. Both Mom and Dad's voices filled the room. Madison, Dad began, his tone sharp. Your brother told us what happened. You humiliated him. That was cruel and unnecessary. Cruel? I repeated, my voice steady. I treated him like every other applicant. That's called fairness. Mom jumped in. Fairness? He's family. Family means bending the rules sometimes. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my words calm, deliberate. Family bent the rules for him my entire life. I was the one who picked up the slack, paid the bills, carried the weight. And where was family when you erased me from Christmas? Where was family when you hid the newspaper with my face on it in a drawer? Silence. Then Dad muttered, You're twisting things. No, I said firmly. I'm telling the truth you've spent years ignoring. I stood, pacing the length of my office, my voice rising now. I am done shrinking myself so Ethan can feel big. I am done giving up my seat at the table so he can pretend he earned his. And I am done letting you guilt me into believing family means sacrificing myself over and over. Mom's voice wavered. Maddie, please. Don't let pride ruin this. Just give him the job. I stopped pacing, my hands gripping the edge of my desk. This isn't pride. This is principle. I built this company with sweat and sleepless nights. I climbed every rung without your help, and I will not let nepotism turn it into another one of Ethan's playgrounds. Dad snapped. If you don't help him, don't expect us to stand by you. We'll cut you off. The words landed heavy, but instead of breaking me, they lit something inside me. I almost laughed. Cut me off? From what? From the family that already exiled me at Christmas? From the love you've never given freely? You can't cut me off from something I never truly had. Silence stretched. I imagined them sitting there, stunned. Because for the first time, I wasn't the obedient daughter, the strong one who stayed quiet. Finally, I ended the call with the words that had been sitting in my chest for years. If you want to stand by Ethan, do it. But don't ever ask me to betray myself again. Not for him. Not for you. Not for anyone. I hung up, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was liberating. Later that week, HR asked for my final decision on Ethan's application. I signed the rejection letter without hesitation. It wasn't just about denying him a job. It was about breaking the cycle. About refusing to let my family's favoritism invade the one place I had built for myself. That night, as I looked out at the city from my apartment, I felt a strange mix of grief and triumph. Grief for the family I had lost, or maybe never truly had. Triumph for the woman I had finally become. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't begging to be seen. I was standing in my own power. And it felt damn good. The weeks after Ethan's rejection were some of the busiest of my life. I threw myself into work, not out of spite, but out of determination. My company had just secured negotiations with one of the largest international clients in the industry, and I knew this contract could change everything. Not just for the business, but for me. Every morning I was in the office before the sun rose, reviewing reports, strategizing with my executives, and preparing presentations that would showcase not only our innovation, but our integrity. I wasn't just fighting for a contract. I was proving to myself more than anyone else that I was more than the girl my parents had erased. And then it happened. We signed the deal. It was the biggest in company history, worth hundreds of millions, and the press pounced on it. Within days, headlines screamed my name. Youngest female CEO lands historic deal. The woman who rewrote the rules of tech leadership. I tried to stay grounded, but there was no denying the surge of validation that washed over me. For once, the recognition wasn't hidden in a drawer or dismissed with a sigh. It was everywhere, On television, in newspapers, on the lips of every industry insider who had once doubted me. The moment that sealed it came 2 weeks later, when I was invited to speak at the Global Tech Summit in New York. It was the kind of stage people spent entire careers chasing, and there I was, standing at the podium, the lights hot on my face, the crowd of thousands waiting to hear my story. I took a deep breath, scanning the audience. Executives, investors, innovators, journalists, every powerful name in the industry was there. And then I spoke. I was told once that I was too much, too ambitious, too strong, too visible, that my place was behind someone else's spotlight. For years, I believed that. But today, I stand here as proof that you don't have to shrink yourself to belong. You just have to keep standing, even when no one is clapping. The room erupted in applause. I could feel it reverberate through my bones. For a fleeting second, I thought of my parents, of Ethan, of every time they told me to step aside. But this applause wasn't theirs to give. It was mine to claim. After the speech, reporters crowded me with questions. One asked, "What drives you?" "After all your success, what keeps you pushing forward?" I smiled, not bitterly this time, but with clarity. What drives me isn't proving people wrong anymore. It's proving to myself that I was right all along. The words made headlines the next morning. They called it the Carter Manifesto. Young women wrote to me saying they felt seen, inspired, like maybe they didn't have to apologize for being ambitious either. For the first time, I realized my story wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who had ever been told to sit down, be quiet, stop shining so bright. Back at the office, my employees greeted me with cheers. My assistant had decorated my office with balloons and a banner that read, "We're proud of you, Madison." I stared at those words for a long moment, the lump in my throat rising. Words I had chased from my parents my whole life. Finally spoken, not by them, but by the people who truly valued me. That night I went home, poured a glass of champagne, and sat on my balcony overlooking the city. For once, the silence didn't ache. It felt like peace. I thought back to the Christmas I'd spent alone, staring at photos of a family that didn't want me. And now, just months later, I was being celebrated on stages they couldn't even dream of stepping onto. The contrast was almost poetic. I whispered into the night air, "You made me strong. Strong enough to walk away. Strong enough to build something on my own. Strong enough to shine without you." The city lights twinkled back at me like an answer. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the strong one who carried everyone else's weight. I was Madison Carter, CEO, leader, survivor. And the world finally knew my name. While my name was echoing across headlines and stages, things back home began to unravel. At first, I didn't notice. I was too consumed with meetings, speaking engagements, and the endless congratulations pouring in. But then, late one night, Olivia called me. "You should see what's happening online," she said. "Your mom's been posting about Ethan nonstop, but the comments, 'Madison, people aren't buying it anymore.'" I pulled up Mom's page. There it was, another photo of Ethan and Lauren at a dinner table, champagne glasses raised. The caption read, "So proud of our son and his incredible partner. The future belongs to them." But the comments told a different story. "Didn't your daughter just close the biggest tech deal in history? Why aren't you celebrating her? Funny how you brag about your son's girlfriend but never mention Madison. Strange priorities. Your daughter is inspiring the world while you're pretending she doesn't exist. Saddy." My chest tightened, not from hurt this time, but from vindication. The truth was out. People could see what I had lived with all my life. And then, slowly, the tide shifted. The likes on Mom's posts dwindled. Friends stopped commenting their usual praise. Instead, they shared articles about me, tagged me, celebrated me. For the first time, Ethan wasn't the star of their little world. I was. Meanwhile, Ethan floundered. After I rejected his application, word spread quickly. The tech industry was small and reputation mattered. Companies knew he had tried to use connections instead of qualifications. One by one, doors closed in his face. Lauren, who had once been plastered across my mom's Facebook as the real daughter, quietly disappeared from the photos. Olivia later told me she had broken things off, tired of carrying the weight of his failures. I should have felt pity, but instead I felt nothing. Because for once, it wasn't my responsibility to pick up the pieces. One afternoon, I received a voicemail from Dad. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Maddie, we might have been wrong. Things aren't going well here. Ethan's struggling. People keep asking about you, not him. We don't know what to do." I listened twice, waiting for the familiar tug of guilt, the urge to rush in and fix everything. It never came. Instead, I thought about all the times they left me standing outside the circle, the times they looked through me as if I didn't exist. And I realized the irony. Now it was their turn to feel invisible. That Christmas, while they sat in a quieter house, no cameras flashing, no posts gaining traction, I was on the cover of a magazine, smiling beneath the headline, "The CEO Who Chose Herself." And that was the truth. I had chosen myself. Not revenge, not bitterness, just freedom. Because the real punishment for my family wasn't my anger. It was my absence. It was the silence where my name should have been, the empty chair at their table, the applause they would never get to hear in person. They had gambled everything on Ethan's shine, and now they were left in the shadows. And me? I wasn't in the shadows anymore. I was in the light, where I had always belonged. I closed my eyes that night, the city lights glowing beyond my window, and whispered the words I never thought I'd believe. I don't need them anymore. I never did. For the first time in my life, it wasn't a lie. So that's my story. I was the daughter erased from Christmas, the sister told to step aside so my brother could shine. I was the one who worked in silence, who carried the weight, who was always too strong to need help. And for years, I thought maybe they were right. That my role was to stay small so Ethan could be big. But I learned something. You don't have to shrink yourself to belong. You don't have to beg for love that comes with conditions. And you don't have to keep bleeding for a family that only notices you when you're gone. Today, I'm not just Madison Carter, the daughter who was left out. I'm Madison Carter, the CEO who chose herself. And that choice, the choice to stop asking for their approval, was the most powerful thing I've ever done. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you were too much or not enough, I want you to know this. Your worth doesn't depend on who claps for you. It doesn't even depend on your family. Your worth is yours, and no one can take it from you. Thank you for listening to my story. And if it resonated with you, please share where you're watching from in the comments. Like, subscribe, and join us here at Hidden Family Revenge Stories. Because the best way to heal from betrayal is to turn your pain into power. Now tell me, have you ever had to choose yourself over your family?